You think you can walk out of there like you're untouchable? Huh? You cost me weeks of work, and you're still standing here smiling. You hear me?
Officer Miller, you need to take a step back. This is a
Hey!
building, not...
Tell me where I can stand! You think that uniform makes you better than... And you're coming...
The sunlight hit the marble steps like a spotlight, making every detail of the courthouse glisten. But in that golden glow, a storm was about to erupt. Officer Derek Miller parked his cruiser roughly on the curb, tires squealing as he jumped out. His eyes locked on the woman standing on the courthouse steps, a black woman dressed in judicial robes, holding a wooden gavel. To Miller, it didn't look like a judge. It looked like defiance. It looked like trouble. Drop the stick. Step away from the building, he barked without hesitation, his voice cracking with aggression. The woman didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She didn't even raise her hand to defend herself. Her calm composure was almost frightening. This was Judge Sierra Sterling, youngest Supreme Court justice in the state. Brilliant, commanding, and respected by every corner of the legal world, she had clawed her way up from the city's toughest neighborhoods to the highest bench. She was known as the Iron Gavel because of her fairness, and the quiet way she destroyed injustice. Before we go further, tell me, where are you watching this story from right now? The US, the UK, Canada, Africa, somewhere else? I want to hear your location in the comments. And if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss stories like this. Now, let's see how everything went wrong in mere seconds. Sierra was posing for a National Law magazine cover. The photographer made a joke, and she laughed softly, the gavel cradled in her hand like a family heirloom, her signature red stilettos peeking from under the robe. To anyone with even a hint of bias, she looked ordinary, accessible, vulnerable. But Miller didn't see dignity, he saw a target. He didn't ask questions. He didn't scan for danger. He only saw the black woman, alone on the steps, and his ego told him to act. He strode forward, sunglasses hiding his eyes but not his intent. The calm click of the camera shutter faded under the screech of tires and the sudden threat in the air. Miller's two rookie partners followed him, uncertain but unwilling to question him. "This is a routine order," Miller muttered under his breath. "Make her comply." Sierra raised her head, her voice steady. "Officer, I am on public property. What crime am I committing?" That simple, legal question enraged Miller. His face flushed, and his hand hovered near his holster. "I'm not going to ask you again," he shouted. "You are disturbing the peace and brandishing a weapon. Comply now, or we will make you comply." She stood her ground, holding the gavel tighter. She wanted to see how officers treated citizens who weren't protected by her title. She wanted to witness the bias firsthand. And Miller, blinded by arrogance, didn't realize he was about to make history, for all the wrong reasons. Suddenly, Miller lunged. He grabbed her wrist violently, twisting her robe. Sierra gasped as pain shot up her arm, but she didn't scream. Before she could even respond, he snatched the gavel from her hand and threw it to the concrete steps. The hollow sound echoed across the plaza. It was more than a wooden object breaking. It was a symbol of authority crushed under ignorance. "That is evidence," Miller shouted. "You are under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting an officer." "I am standing still," Sierra shot back, her voice rising, but not panicked. "You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." "I don't care about your rights," Miller bellowed. He spun her toward a stone pillar, slamming her chest against the cold marble. He slapped handcuffs on her wrists, the same hands that had signed countless warrants, the same hands that held immense legal power. In that moment, her authority meant nothing to him. The photographer didn't stop shooting. Every frame captured Miller's rage, the twisted fabric of the robe, and the shock on Sierra's face. The officer, blind to the fact he was being documented, threatened the cameraman. Put that camera down or you're next. That's obstruction of justice. The chaos escalated as Miller dragged Sierra down the courthouse steps, flaunting his perceived power. Every step was a defiance of the law he had sworn to uphold. Every shove was a mistake that would echo far beyond this plaza. Then, the bronze doors of the courthouse swung open. Chief Justice Robert Halloway appeared, flanked by 2 federal marshals. He stopped mid-step, taking in the scene, the broken gavel, the terrified photographer, and, most importantly, Sierra Sterling handcuffed like a criminal. "What in God's name do you think you are doing?" Halloway's voice thundered across the steps. Miller froze. "Police business, sir. Step back. This woman is." "That woman is Justice Sierra Sterling," Halloway interrupted, descending the steps with terrifying authority. "She sits on the bench you are standing on." The color drained from Miller's face. His confidence evaporated instantly. He had assaulted a Supreme Court justice in full view of the public. For the first time, he truly saw her. The gavel wasn't a weapon. The robe wasn't a costume. He was standing over the wrong person, completely unprepared for the consequences. "Uncuff her." "Now," Halloway ordered. Miller's hands shook as he fumbled with the keys. The cuffs fell away, and Sierra didn't rub her wrists or yell. She simply straightened her robe, looked Miller in the eye, and said coldly, "I'll see you in court." The photographer captured the exact moment Miller realized his career was over. He had abused power against the one person who could take it away from him, and justice was only just beginning. As the dust settled on the courthouse plaza, citizens who had been watching whispered in disbelief. Social media would light up in minutes. News crews were already circling. Miller's mistake wasn't just personal. It was public, viral, undeniable. Sierra Sterling's focus, however, was on the bigger picture. She had been assaulted at work, humiliated, and restrained by someone sworn to protect the law. But she knew her fight wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been powerless in front of someone like Miller. She would make sure his arrogance had consequences far beyond a single magazine photo shoot. Behind her, the bronze doors closed slowly. She was free, but the battle had just begun. Miller, unaware of the storm he had unleashed, thought he was in control. He was about to learn that when you attack justice itself, the consequences are swift, merciless, and unavoidable. The courthouse plaza had gone silent, but the storm had only begun. Officer Derek Miller stood frozen, the humiliation washing over him like a cold wave. He had just assaulted Justice Sierra Sterling, a sitting Supreme Court judge, in broad daylight, with dozens of witnesses and a photographer capturing every moment. In that instant, his career, reputation, and pension were dangling by a thread. Within hours, the police department had pulled Miller's badge, seized his firearm, and placed him on immediate administrative leave. Word spread fast. Body cam footage synced with the magazine photographer's high-resolution images, showing the brutal, unprovoked assault. Every shove, every yell, every violation of protocol was documented in 4K clarity. There was no defense, no gray area. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a textbook example of misconduct. Investigators didn't stop at the courthouse incident. They began digging into Miller's entire career. And what they found was alarming. Over the past 10 years, Miller had accumulated dozens of complaints, minor at first, ignored, buried, and dismissed. The victims were always minorities, always powerless to fight back. A college student tackled and pepper-sprayed for jaywalking. An elderly tourist handcuffed for loitering while checking a map. In every case, the story was the same. Miller claimed resistance, the department looked the other way, and justice was denied. Now, all that hidden abuse was about to surface. Sierra Sterling's legal team didn't just want accountability for her assault. They demanded a full audit of Miller's arrests and misconduct. Subpoenas went out. Every file, every report, every camera feed was scrutinized. It was a revelation. Miller's squad had been operating on quotas, aggressively targeting those who couldn't defend themselves. The courthouse incident wasn't a mistake. It was the inevitable climax of a decade of unchecked bias and aggression. Inside the legal team's war room, Sierra reviewed the footage again and again. She studied Miller's posture, the escalating rage, and the lack of any provocation on her part. "He's always been like this," her lead attorney, Karen Holt, said grimly. "Every single one of these cases is the same pattern. This isn't just misconduct. It's systemic." Sierra nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then we make sure the system pays for it this time. We make it count." Meanwhile, Miller tried to maintain a sense of control. He hired a lawyer and filed statements claiming he mistakenly believed she was a threat. But every piece of evidence undermined him. The photographs showed her standing calmly, gavel in hand, robe perfectly straight. The body cam video revealed him lunging, twisting, and slamming her against marble. The two accounts didn't match at all. During one particularly tense day in court, Miller's attorney attempted to downplay the incident. "My client was acting in good faith," he said. "He misinterpreted the situation." Sierra's voice cut through the courtroom. "Misinterpreted? I was standing on public property, holding a wooden gavel for a photo. There was no threat, no provocation. Your client assaulted me in front of the public. That is not misinterpretation. That is abuse of power." The courtroom was silent. Every person in the room could feel the weight of her words. Miller's defense crumbled under the truth, and the jury could see it. The same hands that had signed warrants, detained criminals, and enforced the law had been used to attack a citizen, one of the most powerful in the state, and for the first time, there was no badge or shield to protect him. But the fallout didn't end in the courtroom. News outlets pounced on the story. National television covered the Supreme Court justice assaulted by officer, headline repeatedly. Social media exploded, the video going viral within hours. People around the world were shocked, outraged, and demanding accountability. Even more damning was the revelation of Miller's prior misconduct. The press reported on every questionable arrest, every missing or corrupted body cam file, and the pattern of targeting minorities. Citizens who had previously been ignored now felt vindicated. Many came forward with their own stories of harassment. The blue wall of silence protecting Miller finally collapsed. The police commissioner had no choice but to act decisively. In a public statement, he announced Miller's termination for cause. But the true shock came next. The review board stripped him of his pension, invoking a rarely used clause for malicious misconduct outside the scope of duty. 20 years of service gone. No badge, no retirement, no respect, just humiliation. Sierra, however, didn't gloat. She understood that justice was bigger than personal revenge. The $8.5 million settlement awarded to her wasn't spent on luxury or personal gain. Every penny went to a legal defense fund for low-income citizens wronged by wrongful arrests and police brutality. She transformed her trauma into a shield for others, turning her pain into protection for those who had no gavel to defend them. In a rare one-on-one interview, a reporter asked her, "Does this feel like justice?" Sierra's eyes were steady, her tone measured. "Justice isn't about money. It's about accountability. Officer Miller thought he was above the law. He wasn't. That is the message everyone needs to understand. Abuse of power comes with consequences." Meanwhile, Miller faded from public view. He couldn't face the cameras, the courts, or the people he had wronged. He had misjudged the one person who could dismantle him legally, and in doing so, he lost everything. Even his colleagues watched in stunned silence. Many officers had warned about his aggression, but no one had spoken up. Now they faced a harsh lesson. Loyalty to justice must outweigh loyalty to a corrupt comrade. Silence protects the wrong person. Sierra Sterling, meanwhile, became a symbol, not just of personal resilience, but of systemic change. Her action didn't just punish Miller. It exposed a culture of bias, negligence, and abuse. It sent a message to law enforcement, judiciary members, and citizens alike. No one is untouchable. Accountability is not optional. It's necessary. In private moments, Sierra reflected on what had happened. The gavel shattered, the cuffs applied, the public humiliation. Each moment had been painful, but each had also been a lesson for the world. She realized that fear, intimidation, and prejudice could only succeed when met with silence. By standing firm, she turned the moment into a platform for justice, education, and reform. The legal battle wasn't just about her. It was about every citizen who had ever been wrongly arrested or brutalized. Every image, every frame of video, every witness testimony became part of a larger story. A story that would resonate far beyond the courthouse steps. Miller's downfall became a cautionary tale. A video played in police academies, in law seminars, and in civil rights classes. Officers were shown what unchecked prejudice and arrogance could cause. Citizens were reminded that every action has a consequence, and that the law is meant to protect, not intimidate. The courthouse steps, once a place of ordinary work, became a symbol of justice's resilience. Where one man tried to bully, a judge stood firm, unshaken, and ultimately victorious. The lesson was clear. Authority is a responsibility, not a weapon. And so, the story of Derek Miller and Sierra Sterling was no longer just a headline. It became a narrative of courage, accountability, and the power of standing firm in the face of abuse. The courtroom was tense, electric with anticipation. Derek Miller sat on the defendant's side, stripped of his badge and uniform, wearing a cheap gray suit that hung awkwardly on his shoulders. His career, reputation, and pension, all the symbols of authority he had clung to, were gone. Across the aisle sat Justice Sierra Sterling, calm and focused in a sharp navy blazer. No longer in her judicial robes, but radiating the same unshakable presence she had shown on the courthouse steps months before. The case had become more than a personal grievance. It was a reckoning for an entire system. Every video frame, every high-resolution photograph, and every documented complaint against Miller was laid bare in court. The jury saw it all. The unprovoked assault, the twisted robe, the gavel thrown to the concrete, and Miller's face, red with rage, as he overpowered a woman who had committed no crime. Miller's attorney attempted one last defense. "Your Honor, my client acted in the heat of the moment. He misread the situation. He intended no harm." Sierra's lawyer, Karen Holt, immediately rose. "Misread the situation. Your client assaulted a sitting Supreme Court justice on her own courthouse steps. He grabbed her wrist, threw her ceremonial gavel, slammed her against marble, and threatened a photographer documenting the event. There was no heat of the moment. There was a decade of unchecked aggression culminating in this attack. That is not an accident. That is a pattern of abuse of power." The jury listened, rapt. Miller's face had drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. All the evidence screamed against him. Every prior complaint, every report, every victim whose story had been ignored over the years now had a voice in this courtroom. Every frame of body cam footage and every photograph confirmed a decade-long pattern of misconduct, bias, and intimidation. During cross-examination, Miller's behavior was examined frame by frame. The jury saw him ignoring basic protocol, shouting commands without reason, and lunging at a judge without provocation. They saw his ego override his judgment. They saw a man who believed his badge gave him the right to bully anyone, anywhere. Then came the most intense moment in the courtroom. Karen Holt leaned forward, her voice steady but icy. "Officer Miller, do you understand the rights you violated when you assaulted Justice Sterling?" Miller shifted uncomfortably, stammering. I was. She. "You don't get to speak over this," Holt interrupted sharply. "Do you understand that you violated her Fourth Amendment rights? That you committed assault? That you humiliated a public official while she was doing her duty?" I didn't mean." "You meant exactly what you did," Holt said firmly. "And today, you will face the consequences of that intent, compounded by a decade of similar abuses." The jury didn't need convincing. The verdict was swift. They found Miller liable for civil rights violations and awarded $8.5 million to Justice Sterling. It was one of the largest settlements in the state's history for a single civil rights violation. The room was silent as the court clerk read the figure. Miller's jaw dropped. 20 years of service gone. Pension lost. Respect destroyed. But for Sierra Sterling, the settlement wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. Every dollar was redirected into a legal defense fund to help low-income citizens who had been victims of wrongful arrests or police brutality. She had turned her trauma into a tool to protect those without power. After the verdict, Sierra addressed the press. "Justice is not about money," she said. "It's about accountability." Officer Miller thought his badge made him untouchable. It didn't. The law applies to everyone, and abuse of authority has consequences. We cannot allow fear and prejudice to govern the streets or the courtroom. Miller, meanwhile, faced an ignoble exit. As he was led out by bailiffs, he had to pass a room filled with cameras. The photographers he had once threatened were now capturing his shame in vivid detail. Flashbulbs popped. He tried to hide his face, but there was nowhere to run. The humiliation was total. He had underestimated the woman he had assaulted and overestimated his own power. Sierra Sterling watched quietly. She didn't celebrate with loud words or grand gestures. She simply nodded to her legal team, straightened her blazer, and walked out of the courthouse doors. The same doors she had been dragged through months before. This time, officers on duty saluted her as she passed. The message was clear. The law is impartial, and no one is above it. Behind the scenes, the impact was already being felt across the city. Police protocols were reviewed. Officers received training on civil rights and the proper use of force. Supervisors who had turned a blind eye were reprimanded. Citizens felt a renewed sense of trust in the system. Proof that when courage meets accountability, even a single person can make systemic change. Miller's downfall became a case study. Law schools examined the incident to teach future officers and lawyers about bias, power abuse, and accountability. Social media kept the story alive, ensuring that the lesson reached far beyond the courthouse walls. Every officer learned that arrogance, prejudice, and unchecked aggression can end careers instantly. Yet the most lasting change came from Sierra herself. She used the settlement to create a defense fund that now protects hundreds of citizens from legal exploitation. Her personal ordeal became a shield for others. She transformed an act of injustice into lasting, systemic justice. In a final press conference, she addressed the nation. "Prejudice blinded you, Officer Miller," she said. "You could not recognize justice even when she was standing right in front of you. Let this be a warning to anyone who holds authority. Power is a responsibility, not a license to intimidate. Treat everyone with dignity, not because of who they are, but because of who you are." The story of Derek Miller and Sierra Sterling became legendary. It wasn't just about a single assault. It was about courage, accountability, and the power of one person to confront decades of injustice. It reminded the public that authority must always answer to the law, and that every citizen deserves respect. Months later, Sierra walked the same courthouse steps once again, this time as a symbol of resilience. Photographers captured her confident stride, but unlike before, she held her gavel with reverence, not fear. Citizens and colleagues recognized her as a guardian of justice, not just a judge in a robe. Her victory had become a statement to the world. Standing up for what is right can create ripples far beyond yourself. Derek Miller's name faded into infamy. He became a cautionary tale, a warning to anyone who might think a badge is more powerful than the law. Meanwhile, Sierra Sterling's influence grew, her legal fund assisting citizens who might otherwise have been silenced. Her actions proved that even in the darkest moments, justice can prevail. By the end, the lesson was clear. No matter how much someone believes they are untouchable, the truth has a way of catching up. Miller thought he was the hunter. But because of his arrogance, his bias, and his abuse of power, he became the prey. And justice, quiet, calm, and relentless, had won. Sierra Sterling had taken a personal attack and transformed it into a public victory for every citizen who had ever been denied their rights. Her courage, integrity, and dedication to the law had not only secured her own justice, but had reshaped the system to protect those who could not protect themselves. The courthouse steps, once a stage for humiliation, were now a monument to resilience, accountability, and the power of standing firm in the face of abuse. The story of Drop It. Racist cop arrests black federal judge became a symbol, proving that courage and justice always prevail in the end.